the whole idea of revenue and expense and time and where it all gelled that morning. And at that point, I figured I'd be an accountant. And so I'm going to file a tax court petition, and we are going to note that the IRS has taken this stance and they are wrong. Our major competitors try to acquire us. We probably get 4 offers a year, not interested.
Hey Charles, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ed. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Iowa. I graduated from high school at 16, worked for a while, and then joined the United States Marine Corps at 17.
hmm
Spent 4 years in service, 2 years overseas, including a combat tour in Vietnam.
What was it like being a Marine going through basic training at that
As
time?
tough as what you read, yes.
Okay.
A lot tougher then than it is now, apparently. But all of us old salts, the old salts told me they had it tougher. Well, I tell the young ones I had it tougher. So, and I'm sure they tell their juniors that they had it tougher. So we all think we had it tough. But
Gotcha.
it is a shared experience that every Marine has. Uh, when I came back from overseas, I was stationed in Kansas City. Met and married my wife, who was 10 years older than I was and had 5 children.
hmm
Um, I claim insanity, but we were married for 45 years before she passed.
How old were you at the time when you got married?
21,
21. Okay. And how'd
21.
you meet her?
She was working at a restaurant that I used to go sit and drink coffee at all hours of the night.
Gotcha.
And she took care of me like no other person did. I like to read, and I was a Marine on a limited budget. And so I'd buy 1 cup of coffee and sit there for several hours. So the tip was a dime. Okay.
hmm
So nobody really wanted to wait on me because, I took up a seat and wasn't tipping that much. So she would move me to an unused station where I was out of the way and nobody was responsible for me. And she would come by periodically and dump out my cold coffee and fill it with hot coffee. And so I noticed her. And uh, later on, there was a bar just down the street a little bit that I've visited, and she came into occasionally, and we got to know each other. And she was going through a divorce and had no place to go with her children. So I said, "Hey, bring them on over."
That's nice.
And the rest was history.
That's really cool. So, you said earlier you had served some tours overseas. Where was that at again?
Well, I was in Okinawa and then Vietnam.
Okay. What was it like being in Vietnam as a veteran? Like I see what's on the movies, but I think it's a little bit different from a firsthand perspective.
It is, and the movie and the TV, how they portray veterans is one of the problems we have with getting jobs in the civilian world after our military service, because that we're portrayed a certain way and they don't see what we actually businesses don't see what we bring to the table.
hmm
Combat is okay. My father was a Navy veteran from World War II, and we talked before I went to boot camp. And one of the things he said about combat was, if you haven't been there, no explanation is possible. If you've been there, no explanation is necessary. So, I can say all kinds of things about it, but they won't mean anything to people who haven't been there. And to the guys who've been there and girls, I don't need to say anything. They've seen the elephant.
Okay. What was it? What was it like? Uh, in reference to, you said you served in combat, and you said you did a couple tours there. I don't want to ask you any specifics about your combat because you said you don't really need to share that. I'm just more of looking at the perspective of what was it like when you found out you were going to be going overseas and you were going to Vietnam? Was that a known variable, or was that something that you may have been
Oh,
stationed somewhere else?
I was a volunteer.
Hmm.
So the war was going on. So, as a Marine, you kind of expected it. It wasn't something, and when I was in Okinawa, I requested transfer to Vietnam, not once, but 4 times.
Hmm.
And when I got to Vietnam, I was in a data processing unit and I asked for and got transferred to a combat unit. I was young and dumb.
Okay. Was there any offensive that you were a part of while you were there, or was it in between?
I was there after the big 68 Tet offensive.
Hmm.
I was there for Tet and 69, but no, I wasn't at anything that made all the headlines. We just had our little area and provided uh, patrols and interdiction, and we were controlled a split off the Ho Chi Minh Trail because once the trail got as far down as we were in I Corps, it had separated into multiple routes.
Hmm.
So we just it was just run of the mill combat.
Okay. Well, that's never heard of run-of-the-mill combat, something new today. So when you were getting done with your tour of duty with the Marines, uh, you were what rank when you were about to depart?
So I was a sergeant.
Okay.
When I got back, when I got back, I was a corporal in Vietnam. I got my sergeant stripes when I came back to Kansas City.
Okay. What made you decide to depart the Marines to do something different with your life? What was the driving factor?
Well, I was on a 4-year enlistment, so my enlistment was up, and it was just time to do something different. I was much more mature than when I went in,
Hmm.
and I was ready for things like college and so on. When I got out of high school at 16, I was not ready for college nor mature enough for it. Uh, I graduated from high school with a literally a D average.
Hmm.
Okay. When I went to college in 2.5 years, I had graduated with honors and had my MBA.
Okay. So,
Okay. Because I was motivated and disciplined, and that discipline I learned in the service. So I sat for and passed my CPA exam while I was still in graduate school. So it wasn't
well,
high school was not a
yeah.
lack of intelligence or ability. It was I was bored out of my mind.
So what inspired you? Because you just said like, hey, I got my CPA when I was at graduate school. What inspired you? Was it the Marines that inspired you to go become an accountant? Was it something that you talked to a friend? What made you jump to that point where you said, I want to do this as a future career?
I can tell you exactly. I was in my fourth semester accounting. I was at the business building at the University of North Texas. Um, it used to be North Texas State when I went, up in Denton, Texas. And I'm on the third floor, and it's morning, so there's lots of sunlight. And I'm walking down the hallway, and the concept of depreciation gelled in my mind.
Hmm.
I knew it intellectually, but I didn't know it intrinsically. And all of a sudden, the whole idea of revenue and expense and time and where it all gelled that morning. And at that point, I figured I'd be an accountant.
It's just like that. Like a light switch turned on, and you're like, this is cool.
This is cool. It was serendipity.
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
at that time, when you were went for the graduate degree for the CPA and you were going down that road, had you already met your wife, or was that before or after? Just from
yes,
the
no, I
timeline.
was I, I was already married.
Okay.
We moved down to Texas from Kansas City after we got married. Uh, I got married in 70. So this would have been about 74 when that struck me. I think I went to school from um 74 to 70 through 76.
Hmm.
So half of 74, 75, and 76. Uh, and again, graduated with honors and got my MBA. So I was motivated, and our daughters were still with us. They were the
Mm-hmm.
youngest. And so my wife and I basically became roommates for about a year for graduate school, because I'd go to classes at night and work during the day. I had a full-time job. She worked during the day and got up very early. So lots of times by the time I got home from school, she'd be in bed and she'd be up and gone when I got up in the morning. So we worked through it,
Okay.
and it was not. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting time in our marriage, but we after 45 years, you have lots of interesting times.
This is true.
So,
This is true.
but later on, she became a partner in my business. So, she helped me. We founded the business together. That's down the road. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't gotten that far yet. But so, yeah, I went to college, got my MBA, passed my CPA exam, went to work for Texas Instruments.
Okay.
Uh,
While in college, just real quick, you had
sure.
mentioned about depreciation. For all the courses that you took, there's always one or two that really kind of have an interesting professor. Did you have any interesting professors while you were in school that really kind of stick in your mind that you have an interesting or funny story about?
Professor Sullivan. Professor Sullivan taught cost accounting.
Okay.
He was the only one that taught cost accounting. He'd written the textbook on cost accounting, and some of his best students made a C the third time through. It was the make or break course for an accounting major at North Texas. That's the course that determined whether you were going to get a degree in accounting or not. And Professor Sullivan was quite a character.
Mm-hmm.
I did well in the class. In fact, later I taught cost accounting because I'd learned it so well under him.
So what made him a
Uh,
character? Like,
he just he just was a character. He was fun to listen to. It made a very boring subject enjoyable.
mm-hmm.
But he was tougher than nails, and you had to know the stuff or you didn't pass. There was no nonsense about him. He was, um, after being in the Marine Corps, his attitude was something I was used to.
You're like, this is normal.
Yeah, this is just an old gunnery sergeant, okay? You jump when he says jump. So I didn't have near the problems that some of the students had,
Mm-hmm.
because he was like an old gunnery sergeant. And no gunnery sergeant has married parents. So
So my question to you is, like, you got out of the military, you got married, you went to college in Texas. Why Texas? I mean, there's a lot of states in the United States you can have gone to college to. What was the driving factor for Texas?
well, when I got out of the military, Kansas City, which is where I left service at, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
was in one of the middle of their union-led construction strikes. And so there were no jobs to speak of in Kansas City. It was winter. Having been 2 years overseas, I didn't like the cold. My wife had a thyroid condition and didn't like the cold. And the best economic activity in the country then, frankly, as now, was Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So we packed up on the 6th of March, 1972. Kansas City was still frozen solid, snow and ice. All the fountains were frozen. And we drove south on I-35, I-35, which is a direct route between Kansas City and Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And when we crossed under I-635, it was 6 p.m. We had the windows down. It was 63 degrees. Ron Chapman was doing primetime drive on the evening radio, and we thought we were in heaven. So we found a motel, stayed the night. The next morning, Ruth found a job. She'd been at Denny's restaurant. I'd been a Denny's cook.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to work immediately. We found an apartment. I went to work the next day, found a job that quick. And so we've stayed in Dallas most of the next 50 years. We did a stint with TI in Lubbock.
Mm-hmm.
We did a stint in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
We did a year in North Carolina with a turnaround operation that I
Gotcha.
went to work for. But we kept moving back to Dallas. In fact, after North Carolina, we moved into the same house we left. We put it for rent for the year we were gone. So we just like Dallas. Uh,
Yeah.
it's home. I've been here for effectively 52 years. Uh, yeah, I'm not a native Texan, but I've lived here longer than most native Texans have.
Well, that says something. So when you were coming from Kansas City to Texas, did you have a lot of like furniture and stuff, or was it just like bags of clothing and you got to
We had a
Texas?
U-Haul trailer we towed behind a 1950 Oldsmobile
Hmm.
that I bought for $90.
Okay. That was probably a lot more back then than it is today. So,
Yeah, it was probably about I think it's about 7.5 to 1.
mhm.
So the equivalent of about $600 today. So it was a cheap car. I later sold it for $2.
Oh, okay. Well, got your money's worth out of it.
I, it was cheaper than renting a car to drive down to Dallas, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Most people will be thrilled to get a car for $90 these days.
Yeah.
Um, so my question to you is, you went to work for Texas Instruments. You mentioned that earlier. What role did you get hired to do initially?
I was a financial analyst.
Okay. And what did you have any interesting stories when you were doing that?
Well, there was pretty much just accounting and finance, and it was interesting. But being in Texas Instruments, I'm 5 levels away from making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So any input I had, and I had some input, uh, I did a number of interesting things. I developed a new product that they never marketed. Other people did later on.
What
A
was it?
digital level for a carpenter,
Okay.
an electronic level.
Gotcha.
I also sat down with one of the senior engineers, and we designed a concept of how to prevent 99.9% of all traffic accidents.
Mm-hmm.
That's never happened because it would require government intervention. That would have been, and we did this with 1980s technology, with the computers that existed then,
Mm-hmm.
and guide pieces in the road and so on. So you'd never rear end anybody, you'd never sideswipe anybody, you'd never run a stop sign. It would all be computer controlled. It was not that difficult. It could be done today, and the nice thing about that, and we looked at it, is the cost of doing that for all the vehicles and all the roads in the country is zero.
Okay.
It's less than the cost of auto insurance premiums.
So why did they not pursue that, in your
It
opinion?
was because TI is a wonderful engineering company.
Mm-hmm.
TI developed the first personal computer, not IBM. They
Okay.
just couldn't market it. Texas Instruments does not know how to market. They have lost huge potential markets and market shares because they can't market. They don't hire marketers. This is why I left TI. I've been there just over a year, and
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Junkins was having the annual meeting, and all the employees in all the sites around the world can watch it on TV. And Mr. Junkins was saying how the previous year they had hired 6,000 new graduates. 5,000 of them were engineers, and how these engineers were in the lab and then brought into administration and back into the lab. And this was developing the future of TI.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on for about 10 minutes on that. And then he said, oh, and we also hired 1,000 other graduates, and went on to the next subject. I was one of those other 1,000 graduates. I knew what my place at TI was, and it was not in its future. He just made that very, very clear. And that's how they operate. And that's fine. They're a wonderful engineering company. They engineer fabulous products.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But they can't market their way out of a paper bag.
So you decided to be like, okay, I see the writing on the wall in Texas Instruments. Where did you go to next?
I went to San Antonio and
Hmm.
took over as controller of Southern Steel, which was a uh, steel bender. We made jails. We did steel work for jails
Hmm.
around the country and in other parts of the world. We did about half the steel jail work in the country. It was a family firm. It had been founded in the late 1800s, and I worked for the founder's great grandson.
Oh, okay. That's pretty amazing. What role did you were you like the foreman,
I,
general
I
manager,
was a no, I was the controller.
the
I was over
controller?
all the accounting.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. I just want to make sure so we're clear because sometimes people jump industries. So as controller, uh, what size of budget were you working with at that time? Because I know there's inflation now, just to get a perspective at that moment in time.
Budget.
Like your
You're talking
annual like
annual revenue?
yeah.
I was probably, oh God, I don't remember, $50 million.
Okay. And just to equate that to today with the rapid inflation.
350, $400 million of revenue.
Okay, gotcha. And how was the expenses back then for that company? Did you have a lot of expenses or did you try to control it or like what was the
Well,
um
that was the problem and why they ended up selling out,
okay.
because the expenses exceeded the revenue. They had a lot of people on payroll that shouldn't be,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of family members that had signatures that weren't doing work,
Mm-hmm.
and dividend payments and supporting a lot of the family members. And uh, it's the old shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations. And they ended up having to sell out to uh, basically private equity.
Okay. So explain that term you just said about the sleeves. Could you define that for me? Because I've never heard that before.
Well, that's an old phrase in family businesses: shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations. Grandpa started out working his ass off in his
Mm-hmm.
shirt sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
The kid takes it over, and the grandkid destroys it because they didn't ever work for a living. The son probably worked in the factory
Mm-hmm.
and did shit jobs in the beginning and swept floors and whatever else needed to be done.
Yeah.
Grandson didn't. He just got brought in. He went to a liberal arts college and played, and then was brought in as a senior executive because he was the son. And when he takes over, he doesn't know business. He doesn't care. I've seen this several places.
Mm-hmm.
They never had to work for a living. They don't understand what their employees are going through and how important the paycheck is to an employee, because they've always had everything. They never had to worry about it. They got sent to an expensive college. They had a fancy car. They had a huge allowance. They never worked for anything. They don't understand. And that's the problem with family businesses: bringing in family members that didn't have to work for a living and don't understand what it is. And it's the bane of family businesses and always has been.
Gotcha. So hearing that you had mentioned you experienced that several times, like in how many different companies did you experience that where you just sort of the writing on the wall?
That was one example of it. And another major example, and the company went bankrupt as well. I worked for when I came back from San Antonio. Um, and it was two generations, not three.
Hmm.
But again, it was a privileged son who never worked for a living and didn't understand what it was. And after I left, it took him less than 6 months to force the company into bankruptcy. Bankruptcy.
What type of company was that?
Footwear.
Okay. Okay. But that's unfortunate to hear, but it's kind of interesting. It shows that you have a lot of unique stories. Like what was your 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 conversations when the parents brought in the kids and the conversations with the kids, did the parents kind of have a clue or was this kind of like a surprise to them?
No, no, they didn't have a clue.
Okay.
They it just it's not that they weren't smart. They just the circumstances in the steel company were such that they just they needed to make some very hard decisions that affected family members, and they were unwilling to make them.
Understood.
And I had to leave because of some ethical situations, which I really can't get into.
No problem.
And so I left, and within a year they had to sell out. Uh, it was too bad. I mean, that company at that point had been in existence for 90 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun. One fun story. This was in the very early 80s, and we had a letter from a jail we'd built in the 1930s. And they were bitching because somebody had sawed through the bars of a window and escaped.
Mm-hmm.
And they found the bars were soft steel, not hardened steel. And they were bitching at us.
Mm-hmm.
And the salesman, who was still there, went into the vault and pulled the carbon copy of the change order
Mm-hmm.
that the county had changed from hardened steel to soft steel to cut the cost. And our response saying that this would make the potential for escape higher,
Mm-hmm.
but that we would do that if that was their request. We never heard from the county again.
I don't think so. Yeah, that's unbelievable. That's crazy. Like, and to think that the employee was there and just be like, hold on, I have this receipt. I remember this sale is unbelievable as well. That's a loyalty upon loyalty of employees.
Well, that and record keeping.
Mm-hmm.
The next job I had was with the footwear company,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a trademark, and it was a circle with an A in the middle and an arrow through it.
Mm-hmm.
We got a letter from the Los Angeles Angels stating that this was too close to their trademark and that we had to cease and desist using it. So we went into the file and pulled the trademark from before the Angels' existence
Mm-hmm.
and wrote them back and said, we agree it's too close. And since our trademark precedes your organization's existence, you obviously didn't do the research when you chose this trademark. So we agree, you should cease to use it. We didn't hear back from them either, and they didn't change, and we didn't sue them. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't think it was that close, but they did, and they got hoisted by their own petard on that one because they hadn't checked their records close enough. So record keeping is extraordinarily important, and accountants are good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Now that brings up a question. You said that both of these businesses had run into troubles. Did they ever like point the finger at you as the controller or like their accountant to say this is truly your fault, or did they kind of
No.
no?
I'd left before both of them collapsed
Mm-hmm.
because I could see the writing on the wall, and I wasn't going to be there for the end, which it's not necessarily bad being the accountant at the end because you're the last guy. You write yourself the last check and you turn off the lights and lock the door behind you. So, but still, you then have to go find a job. So
Yeah.
I was at that point in my life, I was always looking for the next better situation
Mm-hmm.
until I founded my own company a third of a century ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I've stuck with it since.
So, like, did you have many other career opportunities before you started your company, or like after?
Yeah, I had several more. I went to a company in North Carolina, and we did aluminum forming,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very interesting. Learned a lot. I was with a software company that had a software product that was a partially owned subsidiary of a Fortune 500 company
Mm-hmm.
that had asbestos problems, and it didn't survive. The subsidiary. So the aluminum was a turnaround. I
Mm-hmm.
was hired in to help. So we fired a lot of people. My brakes got cut one night, so I almost died on the way home. When I put my foot on the brake, and it just went all the way to the floorboard. Thankfully, having been trained to react to situations,
Mm-hmm.
I kept on the road and used the emergency brake
Mm-hmm.
and just slowed way down and got home. And then that was late at night. So the next morning, called a tow truck, had them tow it in, and they found the brake lines had been cut.
Wow.
And
And
so,
how many people did you have to let go on that experience, or were you just part of the accounting team that?
no, I was part of the senior management team at that point, and we probably let 100 people go from a
Okay.
small town. So we affected everybody in the town. Uh, they were somebody's brother, father, sister, mother, son, daughter, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in town, trying to save the company.
Gotcha.
So that's what it should have been done at the steel company in San Antonio, but was never done.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people needed to be fired. A lot of fat needed to be trimmed, and that's what a turnaround team normally does. And that's why turnaround teams don't stay very long.
Mm-hmm.
They go in and they do all the hard stuff, and then they bring in a savior
Mm-hmm.
who gets rid of the turnaround team and says, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to grow and prosper and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And, is the savior figure for the company. So
Gotcha.
turnaround teams get trashed pretty well. If you've got a big ego, don't do turnarounds.
So how many times did you do turnarounds? Was that your like specialty at one point, or?
I did several.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it because it was a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, you're working for somebody else. And I grew up in a family business. So it was always my desire to run a company.
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized I didn't have the political skills, I started my own. Because I won't stab people in the back and toss them off the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to get to the top in a big company.
Yeah.
Uh, so, in my own company, we play as few politics as possible. It's a very close knit organization. It's not huge. I know everybody. Obviously, it's just a dozen people,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of fun. So
So what year did you start the company?
91,
1991. How old were you at that time?
42, 43.
Okay. And at that point in time, I'm assuming your daughters from your wife, had gone to college and they're like making their way in life, or they?
Yeah, they'd already left. It was just the wife and I. They'd already left the house
Okay.
and moved on, marriage and so on and so forth.
Gotcha. So you started this business. Were you, did you start it in your house? Did you start it like in your garage? I always hear successes of that. Or did you
Well,
like?
here's what had happened. I'd gone to work for Financial Express.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been a assistant controller with J.C. Penney's and turning around one of their divisions, and we got into a contract dispute.
Mm-hmm.
So I was leaving Penny's because they wouldn't honor their contract, at least what I considered honoring the contract. The lawyers,
Everyone has their opinion. Yeah.
everybody has their opinion, and that was, oh Jesus, 40 years ago, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And my attorney said, hey, I got a friend and he's got a company and needs some people. So I went over to Financial Express as chief operating officer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a mobile accounting service. It was a franchise operation. And the board got after the president to get rid of the original operation, the original franchise,
Yeah.
and concentrate on more franchises. So I said, hey, that's right up my alley. I'm an accountant. It'd be my own business. So I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, 9 months later, the franchisor went belly up
Mm-hmm.
due to mismanagement and some other problems. So I changed the name and just kept going. That was 1991.
And you change it from what to what? Because I see a name in the back of your screen. I don't want to make any assumptions.
Well, Get Payroll is our current we both own the corporate name, and that's our go-to-market name.
Mm-hmm.
That's our DBA. Originally was Armark Services Inc., RMARK. And then we added Custom Payroll
Mm-hmm.
as a division. We got in a somebody that helped us do some think tank work and come up with a name. And Custom Payroll Associates, which also is the initials are CPA. So the letterhead is big C, big P, big A, small I. So, we're a payroll services that's run by a CPA.
Mm-hmm.
So we ran with that for a number of years. And I had then sold the accounting portion to my partner I'd taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought in some marketing because I found out, like TI, I can't market either. And we established a DBA of Get Payroll,
Mm-hmm.
which we've been operating now for a dozen years or so, and it's been very successful in the marketplace. So the tagline, of course, is Got Payroll, Get Payroll.
That makes logical sense. It's like a little play of Got Milk for sure.
Exactly.
So you said you had 11 employees. Like, how many of those are marketing and how many of those are non-marketing related functions?
3 are marketing, the rest are not.
Okay. And when did you decide to grow as a business and say we need to bring on more people to handle the workload? When was that hockey stick moment where you're like, I can't do this all myself?
That would have been about 3 years in,
Mm-hmm.
4 years in. I'd already hired another accountant to help with the overload. And then I hired my first non-cost center person. I hired Penny. Penny gave the best phone I have ever seen. She left us after about a year and went and became the executive assistant to the president of Mary Kay Cosmetics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how good she was.
Wow.
We got her for a year and a half, and we're very pleased with that. But that was my first non-cost, non-revenue producing employee, and that was a tough hire
Mm-hmm. How
because
so?
they're not bringing in revenue.
Gotcha.
But in fact, I learned that the proper people in the proper place free up the rest of us that more than can replace the revenue, that the cost of that person with the additional revenue producing time.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to accomplish much more because she was there. Handle the phone, routine paperwork, client contact, mailings, other things. She was able to do those without my time. And that comes back to the basic rule of time management. You should only do what only you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else should be outsourced or hire appropriate level people to do it. And that's something I learned and I've stuck with for years and has been very useful to me is I do what I can do. And this my specialty things. I don't do payrolls anymore. I've got a full operations staff that does that. I do very complex tax work, which requires my CPA and my U.S. Tax Court practitioner's license and other things. I'm the only one at the company at the moment, that we are bringing on another one, who can file tax court petitions. So I spend my time, some oversight, but my job as CEO is to make my employees' life easy
Mm-hmm.
and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
That's my job as CEO, not to do the work. Then I have a little work piece over here that only I can do, so I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tax court filings and dealing with the Internal Revenue Service. Though my operations manager is about ready to get his EA, and at that point we'll start him on his USTCP, his tax court practitioner's license. That'll
Okay.
take a couple of years.
So, in reference to all the different services you offer, which one is like kind of the true money maker? Like, is it small dollars, big pile, or is it like small pile, big dollars? Like in
Lots of small clients.
okay.
Our target market is under 20 employees.
Mm-hmm.
We do handle some bigger companies. We have some multi-hundred person employers. Some have grown organically, some we've picked up.
Gotcha.
Uh, but we have a lot of singles. They just pay themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're a single corporation, single owner corporation, but
Yep.
since they are a corporation and they file a S corp, they have to pay themselves compensation as W-2. So we do a monthly payroll for them. We do some nannies. We do some insurance agents. We do all kinds of things. We're if you've got payroll, we can handle it. Okay,
Okay. Are
so we
you
do all kinds of
nationwide,
payroll.
or are you just
Oh yeah,
target?
we became nationwide in the late '90s. We went on the internet
Mm-hmm.
and we developed the first green payroll,
Okay.
which was paperless. So we've always tried to do leading things. We did the first crypto payroll
Mm-hmm.
for uh, as a service bureau. So we always try to do things and be on leading edge of stuff rather than bleeding edge. The crypto didn't go well when Bitcoin crashed and the crypto market changed substantially from being always up to, oh shit.
Have you ever been asked to get bought out or looked at like buying someone out that's a competitor just to absorb their resources and such?
We've looked at a couple of locals. It's never happened.
Mm-hmm.
We also get uh, we get our major competitors try to acquire us. We probably get 4 offers a year.
Okay.
Not interested.
Mm-hmm.
The company we're in the process. The company's going to go to the employees. I'm
So
not
you're
going to
more
sell
of
it
a
to a
co-op.
competitor.
You make more of a co-op where everyone owns shares and such, or
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the employee stock ownership, something that will pay me out in my retirement
mm-hmm.
out of the profits of the company, and they'll own it. If I live 10 years, they make a great deal. If I live 50, which is pushing it, then I make a great deal. So,
But
but
everybody
they
wins.
help me.
Yeah.
They help me build it.
Okay.
Why shouldn't they get a chance to continue to grow it and prosper and get their retirement out of it like I have?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sorry. Without them, I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't do it all yourself. Not at this level. I mean, sole entrepreneurs, yeah. I could have stayed an accountant with just a book of business and maybe, one person in the office to help with the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to grow up a bigger business. Have we gotten as big as I would have liked? Absolutely not.
What was
Uh,
your metric from say to saying, hey, I want to have a um accountant size business to grow to where you are today, and what was the goal that you wanted to get to as a CEO business owner? Because I know we all have goals and some of them are pie in the sky
oh,
and
I wanted to sell it for $100 million.
okay.
That's what I wanted to do when I started.
How close did you get to that?
Not even close. It's worth a few million.
Okay.
Okay. If I want to sell it to a competitor, I might get 3 or 4 million for it.
Gotcha. Compared to like if you were just a solo operator, what would that price point be looking like if you were like, hey, I want to jump out and
300K.
300K? Is that about average for your industry?
Well, for an accountant, you're going to get about 1 times revenue,
Mhm.
and if you can do 300K of revenue, you're humping.
Okay.
It's more likely 175 to 200 as a sole operating CPA. That's about all you can do.
So my question to you is like, since you have this team of people that you brought together, like I know a lot of entrepreneurs have a trust issue of like they're gonna walk off with a piece of book of my business. How do you protect yourself from that happening?
It was much more difficult as an accountant because it actually happened to me.
Okay.
As a payroll company, it's a different operation. You can't just walk out and start. It's not easy to walk out and start a payroll company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've got to have facilities. You've got to have software. You've got to have knowledge. Yeah. If my operations manager would get somebody to back him, he could go start a payroll company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who's going to market for him? Okay. And our clients tend to be very loyal to us. One of my favorite clients who her and her husband have retired, but we're still doing the successor owners. Okay. Carol was talking to me one day and she said, you know, I get calls every week from people wanting to do my payroll.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them no. And they say, well, we can do it cheaper. And she says, I don't care if you're going to do it for free. I'm not leaving Charles. Okay. That we bend over backwards for our clients. One of the things I use on these podcasts, I tell people that, as a truism, there's never a traffic jam on the extra mile. If you'll go the extra mile for your clients and your employees, you will stand out and you will build loyalty.
Could you give an
And so,
example of that?
example of loyalty, well, Carol, she wouldn't change that they offered it for free, but we just do whatever's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
For our clients. We advise them, we work with them, we go to funerals, we go to weddings. We just go the extra mile for them, whatever they need to make it right. We don't nickel and dime them.
Mm-hmm.
Our competitors, oh, you want another report? Well, it's $5 a payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, that's called flipping a switch in the software and it generates it electronically to go out with their files. Why would I charge them another $5 for that report? Excuse me, that's nickel and diming people. We also have the compliance. If you go to one of our major competitors and you have a problem with the Internal Revenue Service, they'll tell you to talk to your CPA because they will not represent you. They don't want to, and
Mm-hmm.
they won't represent you to the Internal Revenue Service.
Why not?
We take a 2848 on every one of our clients, which is an IRS limited power of attorney. That allows us to advocate for our clients with the IRS. We can do the same thing for the states and the locals. That takes on a level of professional responsibility that our competitors won't take on.
So they won't do the 80/20 item that you mentioned.
2848.
20, I'm sorry, 2848. My apologies.
Yeah. They'll take a reporting, whatever it is, a reporting document which allows them to send in reports
Mm-hmm.
and make deposits for you. But they will not advocate for you. If the IRS makes a mistake, or if you make a mistake and have done something wrong, they won't advocate for you. We will advocate for our clients up through and including tax court.
Mm-hmm. What's
I've
it
got
like going to tax court? Like,
well,
I've
tax
never
court.
been, so I'm just kind of
Oh
curious.
yeah. Okay. To go to tax court, what you have to get is a letter of notice of determination from the IRS
Mm-hmm.
saying you've got 90 days to do something about this, or else all your appeals are over,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the right to go to tax court. So we file a petition with the U.S. tax court, costs $60. That gets our clients a whole nother bite at the apple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It goes to docket appeals. It goes to very sophisticated IRS people who are looking at these things, and 95% are settled pre-court.
Why is
We
that?
have one because they don't want to go to court. It's time consuming. And if they lose, it sets a precedent. And they don't want to set precedents of them losing. They'd rather settle these things. And it's of course time consuming. It requires resources. And you never know when you go to court. It's 50-50 what'll happen. Mm-hmm. So most of them are settled pre-court, and that's fine. So even if we're wrong, we can settle for a lesser amount. But I have one right on my desk now.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back about 5 years. We had sent in the W-2s electronically, as was required. And we have the proof that we sent them, and they were accepted by the IRS. And the IRS has issued a civil penalty for our
Mhm.
client, saying you didn't file these things on time and you owe us $5,000. No. Well, I've appealed this through all the administrative appeals, and we keep getting people saying, oh, okay, we'll look at it. And then they close the case and it goes back to collections. And trying to find out why they closed the case or who closed it is literally impossible.
Mhm.
So we got last week a notice of determination on this after 6 years. And so I'm going to file a tax court petition later this week. We have 90 days. And we are going to note that the IRS has taken this stance and they are wrong because of this. Well, this will go to tax court. It will immediately go to docket appeals. District counsel will call me and say, can you prove you filed them? And I go, yeah. Let me fax it to you, as I faxed it to previous IRS people. He'll get it. He'll look at it and he'll say, Mr. Reed, this is all going to go away. I'll send you a letter for you to accept that it's going, that we've zeroed it all out.
Mhm.
And I'll sign it, and that'll be the end of it.
Gotcha.
Because the district counsel, who's an attorney, knows that if I walk into court with this document,
They lose.
not only are they lose, they are going to have to pay me
And
for
what
my
would-
time.
Okay. Will they have to pay your client too, or just you?
No, they will have to pay my fees. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, as a CPA, I'd get about $150 an hour.
Mhm.
As a U.S. tax court practitioner, I'm going to get about $450 an hour. And they're going to have to pay me $10,000. They don't want to do that.
Mhm.
They'll look at that and go, we're never going to win this.
Mhm.
The judge is going to look at this and go, he's going to look over the IRS counsel and say, why the hell am I here? Why the hell are you pursuing this, prosecuting this, when you know that they did what they were supposed to do, and that civil penalty is bogus? And the IRS district counsel, who has to show back in front of that tax court judge on a regular basis, is not going to be happy. So it's never going to go to court. It's going to get settled within 90 days of me filing the petition. And I know that,
Okay.
but I have to wait for the notice of determination before I can file in tax court.
In reference to the stress level for you and for your client with tax court, how high is the stress level generally?
Much higher for my client than for me.
That's fair.
This is, well, it's why I tell my clients, don't talk to the IRS.
Mhm.
Let
Why?
me.
Why do you
Because
suggest that?
it's emotional for them.
Okay.
It's their money. It's their pocketbook. They get upset. And that was brought home to me here during COVID.
Mhm.
The IRS screwed up on my company's taxes. And I got a letter. So I called the revenue officer, not agent, officer. And he's going, and I'm going, no, wait, this is here. This is, and we sent you this, and here's copies of this. He said, I don't care. You need to pay this. And I said, no, it's already been paid. This is all done. It was all filed. And he goes, no. I'm going, look, you SOB. And I'm starting shouting at him on the phone because he's not doing his job.
Okay.
He's violating his own rules, his own procedures, and he's not listening to me. And he doesn't care. He's a civil servant. He doesn't care. Okay.
Mhm.
His job is to collect these things, not to understand them. And so I find myself yelling at him over the phone,
Mhm.
and he gets nasty and files a lien on my business. It took 2 weeks to get a hold of his supervisor. This was COVID. And I explained to his supervisor, and he said, oh, Mr. Reed, that should not have happened. You're right. We will take care of it. And it all went away. Okay. Because I knew what the next step was.
Gotcha.
But I let myself get emotionally upset because it was my pocketbook and my taxes. Well, my clients do the same thing. When I'm talking to the IRS about their money, it's not near as emotional for me. My lawyer used a phrase years ago on a whole different thing, and I've used it ever since. And it's like playing high stakes poker
Hmm.
with somebody else's money.
Gotcha. Let's jump back
Okay.
for a second. You had mentioned there was a difference between a officer and an agent in the IRS. Could you tell me the difference between the two?
Yeah. A revenue officer is a much less trained,
Hmm.
normally less experienced, less knowledgeable uh, office staff, local, uh, and handles smaller things and tends to be involved in collections and so on. An agent is a much more experienced and educated position, higher salary,
Hmm.
uh, and agents don't think much of officers uh, because of they tend to do things that they shouldn't.
Okay.
My ex my ex partner, who still offices with me, is an ex IRS agent. He has a master's degree.
Hmm.
Okay, he has his MBA, CPA. You don't normally find officers that have master's degrees and or CPAs. They are not as well educated or as experienced. So there is a major difference when you're dealing with an agent as opposed to an officer.
So is an officer more like an entry level position that someone?
Much more clerical than they follow up on missing paperwork and these kinds of things. They're not involved in big cases
Mhm.
and frauds and major corporate cases, major taxpayer cases. Those don't fall into the officer's purview. Those are for agents.
Okay. So can someone in the IRS just come in as an agent, or do they have to work their way up the line to be an agent?
No, they can come in as an agent, but it requires a different level of expertise and education.
Okay. Have you ever thought about going to work for the IRS in your life?
Yeah, and pretty well discarded it immediately. Um, and nothing against my ex partner, but when you look at all the jobs in the world,
Hmm.
from the most desirable to the least desirable, where does working from the IRS fall on that scale?
I have no idea.
Okay, for me, it falls relatively nearer to the bottom than the top
Okay.
because just imagine yourself saying to your neighbor, "Oh yeah, I work for the IRS," at the neighborhood barbecue. How much conversation is that going to shut off?
A lot. Yeah, a ton. So,
And I don't having been in the bureaucracy of the military. No, I don't want to work for a bureaucracy the size of the Internal Revenue Service or the federal government at all. Uh,
so
the only job I might consider in the IRS would be commissioner, and they're never going to hire me.
So my question to you is like I know in the news in the past they were going to arm IRS agents with I mean you're a Marine, you know you've had combat
They've always
experience.
been armed.
Like why?
There's always been armed agents. The
Like
CID division,
hmm.
Criminal Investigation Division, are law enforcement officers.
Hmm.
They carry a badge, not an ID card. They have an ID card as well, but they have a badge.
Okay.
I'll tell you a story. This was years ago. I was in my office and my receptionist. We had receptions at that point in time, not anymore. Called me in my office and said, "There's two individuals up here who want to talk to you."
Hmm.
And I walked up and they showed me badges,
Hmm.
identification. One was with the IRS, the other was with the Small Business Administration, CID.
Hmm.
I said, "Okay, if you'll follow me." I went in and to the copy room and got copies of their identification. Then I took them into the conference room and sat them down and said, "Now I'm going to do what I advise every one of my clients to do. If an agent shows up with a badge, I'm going to call my attorney." And I called my attorney and he got on the conference phone
Mm-hmm.
and we had a discussion. One of my clients had filed a fraudulent lien release
Mm-hmm.
from the IRS and had an IRS
Mm-hmm.
agent girlfriend, to get a small business administration loan,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and had forged my name to several documents.
Gotcha.
And he spent 2 years in the federal penitentiary.
Interesting.
So for all your listeners, if they've got a badge, they're a law enforcement officer, they have a gun on them and they have handcuffs. They can take you away and take you down to the local federal lockup if they choose to. So if they have a badge, call your attorney.
That's a very good point to bring up. So that's kind of an interesting arc and jump. Like more or less those individuals with the guns in the IRS are like the ones that are actively on the street arresting people and taking them in. Because I didn't understand why they needed to have millions and millions of guns added to a arm of the government, which my perspective was like bean counters, not to be mean, but they were like just
I am one. I'm sorry.
yeah. Um, but now that you put that perspective on it, that opens up my eyes to a lot of ways. Um, do you see them being used quite often, or is that kind of like
No, they're a small group and they're rare. Yes, they're going to increase the size of it, but they're
Mhm,
not going to arm standard agents and officers. They are bean counters, okay, uh, and they don't need to be doing that. But uh, TIGTA, which is the successor to CID,
mhm,
they're law enforcement officers. They are trained as law enforcement officers, and so they are armed. They're no different than FBI agents, and a number of FBI agents are accountants. Really, to be an FBI agent, it used to be you needed to be an accountant or a lawyer.
mhm,
That's who they hired because it was investigative. They carried a weapon because they were investigating criminal activities and might need to be armed. The IRS is not much different. It's just that they do less criminal stuff. So only that group that is associated with criminal activity really needs to be armed.
mhm.
Most of them aren't armed and never will be. They're like you said, bean counters. They're checking returns and doing audits and all this kind of stuff. And the enforcement is all paper and communication and bank levies and liens and so on. It's not going out and seizing assets at gunpoint.
Mhm.
That happens, but it's a rarity, and it's not something the average taxpayer needs to be concerned about. But again, if for some reason they show up and have a badge, they're a law enforcement agent and they're armed, and you need your attorney. You don't need to talk to them. And I tell my clients, don't call me because I can't help you. Call your attorney.
Yeah, call me after you call your attorney. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
And
yeah, go on.
one other thing, as a U.S. tax court practitioner,
Hmm.
if I'm on a U.S. tax court case, my communication with my client on that case is protected, just as if I was an attorney. If I'm not on a tax court case, communication with your accountant is not protected. And if they go ask your accountant what was said, he has to tell them. He has no right not to if they have the appropriate warrants and so on.
Hmm.
Okay. So be careful what you tell your accountant. It's not protected. If you're worried about it, call your attorney and have your attorney engage your accountant, and then it all becomes protected.
Interesting.
Since we're talking legal stuff here,
No, that's good. That's very, very helpful to know because I know there's probably people who are going to listen to this and find that to be informative. And um, not many of us actually have an accounting degree or a law degree. So, like, all these little nuances are kind of a big deal. So where do you see the future of like the IRS and the tax code going to? Because I know like there's always chatter every few years about it. Do you see that changing, or is it pretty much locked in place?
Oh, no, it's going to get more intrusive because that's government always does.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get more and more intrusive. Taxes are going to have to go up. Uh, our government is spending like a drunken sailor.
Mm-hmm.
And until that stops, taxes are going to have to continue to rise. Social Security's in problems. Our debt's now what, $30 trillion? That's actual debt, not unfunded liabilities,
Mm-hmm.
which now exceed over $100 trillion when you add that in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're in deep, deep, deep trouble. And until our government ceases to spend like a drunken sailor, we're going to be. And
So
so the IRS is going to have to get bigger and more intrusive.
at what point in time do we have as a country, and because your background lends itself to this, to have a change style group come in and say, we're going to cut back and let people go and reorganize things, like before our country gets to a place where the debt is astronomical and we are never able in the lifetimes of ourselves or our children to pay it back?
We're already at that level. There's no way we can pay back $100 trillion. Okay, you take $100 trillion, you divide it by 330 million people, and you'll realize just how many hundreds of thousands of dollars every individual owes.
Hmm.
It's not sustainable, it's not supportable, and it's not payable. So we've already reached that point. That's a non-issue.
Hmm.
Where it's going to reach the point where it's going to totally destroy the country and the economy, I don't have that answer. I figure I'm lucky that it's probably not going to be in my lifetime. I'm live on a 20-year horizon. I expect to live 20 years from today.
Hmm.
I figure the country will survive 20 years. Will it survive in my grandchildren's time? Probably not.
Okay, not like it looks today, like where there will have to be a reorganization of some sort, or
Of some sort. We're
yeah.
we're going to have to uh, stop being everything to everybody and providing everything to everybody. Um, the welfare state just and to his great credit, and I'm not a fan of Bill Clinton. When he put in workfare, that was a wonderful thing.
Hmm.
That to get welfare, you had to work. That didn't last. Um, and we're destroying the nuclear family. And there's a lot of political things that really are probably outside of this podcast. I'm a relatively fiscal conservative individual, being a CPA, uh, and the money I see being spent on crazy things. If you're interested, Rand Paul puts out his list every year
Hmm.
of expenditures that are crazy, and you can go to his website and find it. And if you look at it, you'll be appalled at some of the things we're spending money on. Literally appalled. And I recommend that everybody go look at it. So Senator Rand Paul
Hmm.
from I think Kentucky. His father was Ron Paul, who was a big libertarian. So he puts out a list every year of government spending that is ridiculous. But that's just a drop in the bucket.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, it's been very interesting to listen to you and share your insights and perspectives on everything in your career history. I really enjoyed this podcast, and thank you for coming on today.
It had been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
This episode was made and produced by i4 Web Services. Visit i4webservices.com to learn more.